I'm not sure I like hearing my own voice.
But do you think it sounds like somebody else?
I've always felt that. When I hear I really can't stand hearing my own voice. It's just there's something about it. It grates on
So
me.
I'll cross you off the podcast listener numbers
Yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
Andy had such a bad time.
Yeah.
He unsubscribed.
Yeah, I'll go home and cry a little bit when after this too, after having to listen to myself for so long.
Hey, hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the studio. I always get a thrill from that, especially after a hot summer, to return to the quiet aircon bliss of the studio. But my happiness, obviously, is mainly because of my guest today, Andy. Welcome.
Hello, Ian. Lovely to be here.
Good. So tell everyone who you are.
So I'm Andy Jace. I am the digital director at Fenwicks. We have known each other for a long time, I think. We were paths crossed back in the early days of House of Fraser. So I've been in retailing since the late 90s, so 99.
Last century.
I know.
Absolutely. Well, no one would know that looking at you. They'd certainly know it looking at me. But let's now just track back. So we're going to spend our time in the wonderful world of Fenwicks. So as I say this, depending on where listeners are, they will immediately conjure up an image, a very vivid image of their Fenwicks. So my local one is local. My nearest one, rather, is Bond Street. And it's just one of those delightful places that has everything from, a cafe to feed your kids to when you just got to find something for 50 quid for the auntie you've forgotten about, that you're seeing in half an hour, that's tasteful. It's just kind of a delightful store. So for people who maybe haven't come across it, how would you describe the essence of Fenwicks?
I think the important thing about Fenwicks is it's a family-run department store. We've recently, this year, actually celebrated our 140th birthday. So we've got a fantastic heritage spanning back a very long time. We're predominantly based in kind of the east of the country, so southeast and east, and we have our flagship store up in Newcastle, which is where originally the Fenwick family are from. And it's kind of a smaller department store, so we cover the breadth of a normal department store's offering, so fashion, homeware. We do some furniture as well, but really we're more on the boutique-y end, I think, of department stores. So especially as you mentioned the Bond Street store, it feels very much like a Bond Street boutique. It's a lovely store.
It has terroir. It is
it
where
certainly
it is.
does.
Yes.
Yeah, it certainly does. And it's it's a great place. In the summer we've got cafe seating outside it, and there's a vegan restaurant now down in the on the lower ground floor.
Wow.
So it's a really lovely space to be in. Our stores are kind of spread out, as I say, across the east of the country. So we have a store in Bracknell, Canterbury. We've got up in Newcastle and York as well. So kind of run down that side of the country. So we're probably better known in that part of the world. And certainly what we tend to find is that we have very loyal customer groups that shop in Fenwick. So if you live in a town or the surrounding areas of a town that has a Fenwick, we have a really loyal customer base that comes in and shops with us and really enjoys the Fenwick experience.
Yeah, and I think, you're putting your finger on something there. I mean, I would first of all say that Bracknell is Greater Wales, and so counts as, the west part of God's own country. But, I can remember growing up in South Wales where we'd go to Cardiff. My gran would put on her fake fox stole and her best hat to meet her friends at Howells or David Morgan's, because there was that sort of Art Deco sense of occasion about them. If you like, bringing this sort of the Emporium feeling, bringing the best of the world to a community. But you'd spend hours there, as I remember as a child being dragged around crying on the carpet. But now you see people go in, they'll meet, they'll chat, they'll have lunch, brunch, etc. But as we say this, and everyone's nodding and thinking how lovely, the tide online has been turning to mega destinations, the place of everythingness. Amazon, 200 million SKUs, Shein, God knows how many, ASOS, God knows how many. And especially as some of the former department stores have become digital marketplaces, everythingness has become everydayness.
Yeah.
Do you think that, therefore, your time is coming again with this curation, or is the everythingness something you're having to fend off or emulate?
I think our time is coming again with the curation, actually. And I think even, if I think back to my time at Selfridges, that was all about curation as well. It wasn't about stocking everything. It was about stocking the best, the coolest, the things that you must wear.
Mm.
And I think that Fenwick is has that same essence. It's about offering our customers the best of what's out there. You don't have to trawl through the billions of SKUs that are available to, products that are available to purchase on Amazon or wherever else it is. Actually come to us and we will give you the best brands. We will give you, the best curation of those brands, so that it's easy for you to find what you want. And I think that's kind of also the beauty of department stores as well, is that you can come to us and we will have that edit. We'll have our point of view, our tone of voice, and something that you can buy into and feel part of.
Yes, and who is the customer then? Because, being a slightly older man, I'm always wary when I walk into a store and think, oh, I love this store, that anybody who hasn't reached 50 is thinking, that's an old person's store. So where does this engagement fit sort of in the generational span?
I think with Fenwick, obviously, because we've got such a long history, we do have a really broad age range of customers within the business. We've got, an older generation of customers that shop with us for years, but they've brought in their children, they've brought in their family, and so we span through the generations with what we do. And I think part of the direction for Fenwick going forward is around how do we appeal, across, a wide spectrum of people, and making sure that we are bringing in the younger generations, but we're also not scaring off, those people, my age, your age, that want to come in and, still like to buy nice, fashionable products. But don't necessarily. I mean, you're looking very good today, Ian.
Thank you, Andy. And since we're in people's ears, no one can deny that.
Yeah. And I think having that broad appeal to means that we need to get those edits of product right as well. We need to make sure we have product that appeals to across the generations. Of course, we've got a core of customer, and our core customer is probably 30s to up into their 60s. So it's we're kind of, that is the majority of the young people, really young people. The majority of people that we see. But we also we want to be encouraging people in their 20s to be future shoppers with Fenwick, and we're starting to look at the how we do that with the brands that we buy, with how we're creating things, with how we're laying out our stores, with how we're making things feel more modern, for people to want to shop. And actually, I think, with the point of making stores and things feel more modern, and that isn't just something that young people want. It spans across generations. There is definitely a different way of shopping now. People want to see product laid out in different ways. They want to feel like there's space to move around a store and to see product, and not have everything kind of crammed in a what would have been a more old school way of perhaps laying your stores out.
So with online, there's a sort of homogenizing effect where you see the flagship experience in terms of stock and range. And then you wander along to your local store and it's sort of a sticky, flawed, subprime thing. So there is that gap between digital and your actual local store. But in your case, you have, was it 8 stores?
9.
9 stores, sorry, missing a count. Is there anything that ties them together? So if I found myself in Newcastle, I thought, I must go and see Fenwicks. Am I going to think, it's a different store that has you called Fenwicks? Or is there some DNA that ties them together so I feel Fenwicked rather than just in the city?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it's, and actually we were talking about this the other day when we're talking about what makes up the Fenwick brand, and hopefully I'm going to get this right, the kind of the phenotype of the brand, which is our outward appearance out to customers in our different stores will look different, because the stores are very different buildings, they're in different geographical locations, so they have their own uniqueness to them. But when you walk into those stores, you should still feel like you're walking into Fenwick. You should still feel like it's part of Fenwick, because our DNA is the same. The brands that we offer across those stores may alter slightly, but they should all feel part of the same story. They should all feel part of our tone of voice and what we have to offer. And I think the way we kind of lay things out, the way we visually merchandise things, the way you'll be greeted within our stores, the hospitality we offer, that's all of the things that make you feel that you're in a Fenwick store, versus the kind of the visual, what does the store look like? Where is it? Which does have its kind of local quirks and nuances.
which of course you would do if you bought the building 100 years
Yeah.
ago. Right, let's just do a quick foot on the brake and pause, because we've skipped over the first thing you said, which was digital director.
Mm.
So, super cool job title. Not quite sure what it means, especially in this context. So, can you just tell us a bit about the role
Yeah.
and how it fits in, and what you're tasked with achieving?
My role is accountable for the entirety of our digital estate. At the moment, we're trading through a website, so fenwick.com, fenwick.co.uk. We don't have an app. That is something that we will be looking to do in future. But my role is the overseeing of the digital estate, essentially, and all elements of that. So I look after the trading of the website. I look after the digital marketing team, the development of the website as well. So all of those functions that you would expect within a digital business fall into my remit. Ultimately, what I've come in to do, I guess, is that I've joined a business that has already gone through the initial stages of setting up their digital business. So they've done a lot of the heavy lifting, and thank you for that, my predecessors, of getting the website stood up, getting a lot of processes in place, there's a lot of hard work that's happened to get us to where we are right now. But we're now at a kind of a tipping point of what is our next seismic leap that we have to make. And as a business, we see digital as one of our, the main growth area for us, or the largest growth area for us as well. So while we still see our stores growing, digital is growing exponentially to that. So what I have to look at is, okay, so how are we going to maintain that growth going forward? How are we developing the digital business to make sure that it is part of the Fenwick DNA, and it feels like Fenwick, and there's a reason to come and shop with us. I guess in our store locales, we are part of that location. So, and you become a destination for that. When you're doing something digitally, there is a huge amount of competition that you don't have necessarily, in the physical world. So, and I appreciate that that's not strictly true, but it is a different landscape, and we have to deal with some big players out there who do a similar offer a similar thing to what we do. So finding our place in that and finding what makes Fenwick online is something that I'm tasked with, helping the business get to. We have some really aggressive, growth planned in over the next 5 years, and some really great kind of pillars that will help support us deliver that growth. But it is, it is a challenge to, for us to, to get there. So essentially, my role is helping lead the business in our digital growth plan, and making sure that we're making smart decisions, making sure that we're investing our time, money, effort in the right places to really be able to make sure that we are making that seismic leap that we need to make going forward.
So let's talk about the leap then, because, we both know that when, let's say, a department store starts e-commerce, and you can map this onto something like the Carnegie Mellon capability maturity model. You start off, with someone in the corner with a web account that puts up a marketing site, then a subset of the stock you can physically pick and stick on a truck. And it grows and grows, basically digitizing an existing, capable, complex, sophisticated operation. Yeah. If you like, you're a digital veneer on it. But around sort of 10, 12% of turnover, it stops being, oh, we're a store with a website that does what we do, to being, hang on, we need to do things differently. Yeah. Maybe the order management system needs to be more digital than physical, and cut-off times and we've been through all of this. So are you reaching that point or beyond it, where digital isn't just the cherry on the cake, but is having cake-like conversations about, what we really are?
I think we're kind of reaching that point, and that's been my introduction into the business as well. Is that's the point that's been reached, is that we need to, as you say, start thinking about digital as part of the cake, and not just something that's on top of it. And to be able to do that, yes, we do have to change a lot of ways of working, a lot of how we do things, from how we think about buying product. Buying for a digital business is, as we know, different from buying for a physical business.
Let's focus on that then, so that our reader doesn't mail me late and say, Ian, you skirted over that. Let's maybe look at that. How does that change for you then? Because you've got deep relationships with lovely brands and a relatively shallow seasonal buy. That's what it looks like from outside. And all of a sudden you say, right, let's light the fuse, digital's here. What has to change? How do those conversations go?
There's definitely a kind of a journey we have to go on with the brands as well, for them to understand the direction we want to go in and to feel comfortable coming on that journey with us. And I think the vast majority of brands that we work with and speak to are really supportive and happy to be part of the journey with us, which is fantastic. I think the things where we need to kind of change how we do things is really about thinking about what works online and what doesn't, and what should it. I think often there's kind of view that if you're starting up a digital business and you've got a physical business, that the digital business needs to have everything that the physical business has online. I don't think that's true. I think that you need to be able to offer your credible range, but there are certain things that just don't work online, and some of those things don't work because they don't work commercially, and by the time you've added in all of the costs that you have to run a digital business, actually it doesn't make sense to be doing some of those things online. So you have to look at different ways to be able to offer that to customers who can't physically come to your store, which there are definitely ways of doing. But it's more about how do you get that range online that is going to give you the cut through. So, how are we working, the brands that we're working with, the ranges that we have with those brands, all of those types of things, what do those look like that enable us to compete in the, in what is a really competitive
When we say
marketplace?
compete, are we talking here about the search environment, or are we talking about, maybe social or other channels just to get the consumer's eyeball?
I think it's a bit of both. Certainly in in search, I think that is obviously a key area that we have to be able to get cut through and to give us that visibility. And that as I mentioned at the start, our physical presence is kind of down one side of the country, right? So if you're on the other side, we're maybe not quite as a recognised brand nationally because we don't have that physical presence that has kind of embedded that over a long time. So when customers are going on that mental shopping journey of I want this product or this type of thing and start searching in Google to try and find that, it's how do we make sure that we become visible in that in that journey? What are we offering as our point of difference within that? What are the kind of the lower distribution things that we can be part of and make sure we appear in those that start giving us those that point of difference as well in that space. And we definitely have we have that, and we we work with a lot of brands that give us that already, but it's kind of widening that and scaling that out, which is the challenge over the next 5 years.
So if I look at somewhere like a Selfridges, they would play on uniqueness of product, the one and only thing in the world, come see it, and a lot of location-based experiences. So anything from a denim week to a recycling thing in store. So it's very much this is the one place in the world, come see it. You then got the big guys who are search engine monsters with every SKU in every conceivable thing on every search engine. So you're sort of somewhere in between in that. Again, just talk me through the thinking. So you're talking to the digital marketing team. You're saying you want to be found and seen, but you haven't got unlimited budgets, you haven't got unlimited stock, and you haven't got unlimited time. So somewhere you need to focus on a priority. How do you go about that?
I mean, that is clearly the big challenge, right? And I think
sorry to bring the things down here.
Yeah, thanks. But I think that is where we're looking at kind of where do we feel we can get cut through on things, and using our digital marketing team and the agency that we work with to really help us capitalize on that and be able to make that into our core strength. So it is about finding those areas where we can kind of double down on things. And it's been clever with how we are spending, and we're not just going out there and going into kind of a gunfight with people with much bigger budgets than us, because that's probably not going to turn out so well. So
unless you're Google.
Yeah, unless you're Google. Yeah. Well, exactly. Then you've got a very big budget. So, it's but it is about making sure that we're being clever with the way that we, and smart with the way that we are spending our money, essentially, and how we're bidding on things, what we choose to bid on, what we choose not to bid on, and using those areas where we have product that other people don't have, or we have brands that other people, are less widely distributed, but are on.
Yeah, there's a critical mass. With you.
Yeah. So it's something that we are that's definitely a really focused on at the moment, about how do we continue on that path, and how do we make sure that we're getting the most out of what we do, and we're really kind of increasing our the awareness of Fenwick, as well as drawing people in to come and enjoy a great shopping experience with us as well.
Yeah.
And it's something that we have to mature over time. And again, as I mentioned before, coming into the business now, that's one of the kind of the key things that myself and the my marketing team are really focused on working on, is about how do we develop that strategy for really being able to get the cut through that we need.
We touched on your customer a few minutes ago. That's a 30 to 60 chunk, also known as the people who still use email. But you look at the younger consumer. Where does customer insight data analysis feed into both your strategy and then your marketing tactics?
Yeah.
So, are we seeing that as you move away from being just location-based and physically there to being digitally top of mind, is that changing the way you need to know and understand your customers and then respond to that data?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think one of the great things it does is it actually means that we get to know our customers even better, and get to know customers that we didn't know before. They may have been shopping with us, but we didn't actually really know them until, we were able to really use the data to help understand the behaviors, what they're interested in, where they're shopping, what they do and don't like. We are trying to really make sure that the decisions we make going forward are based on or backed up by the data that we have about our customers, and looking at how we're segmenting, even relatively straightforward things, but looking at how we're segmenting our emails, for example, and making sure that we are sending out emails that are going to be of interest to, groups of people depending on what they've shopped, in the past, rather than just kind of sending out, a broad brush across everybody that's that probably doesn't get the cut through that it needs. So, we are, again, because we're so young in the digital space, we are finding our way through a lot of that at the moment, and as we've matured from a data perspective, and now we have, while we've been collecting the data, it's then having access to the data and then being able to, understand the data and use it. And we're getting into a much better place with that now to really be able to utilize that to make sure that we are, being more relevant, talking to customers in a way that is relevant to them, rather than just talking to them about Fenwick.
Yeah, my favorite word, relevance. Now, I'm going to ask you about your career in a second, because it's fascinating, and I don't want to read it out, so I want you to cover it. But when you arrive at a new job and people go, "Oh, Andy, he was at that there company before, you must have done that," there's always a temptation to go and say, "Well, I've got a shopping list of all the things that worked in my last place, so we'll implement them all in Q1." But you're also saying quite modestly that, the business is at an earlier stage. So as you look at this role, coming for 20 years after previous growth roles, are there things that you think, I don't have to do this anymore, it's a solved problem, or it's disappeared? Are there things that have just matured themselves into non-existence? Question one. And question two then is, if you had to bet for the rest of your life in every job, what's the one thing that you would do in the first quarter? So let's start with the first one. Are there things that we just don't have to do anymore because the time has been and gone in digital?
It's interesting because there are, but I think I think a lot of it is around how technology has caught up with what the demands or the aspirations of businesses. I think, if I think back to some of the traumas that I've had in the past with trying to deliver the aspiration of the business and the wants of a customer, and then having to try and get the systems to do what you want them to do at the same time, that can be pretty traumatic at times. And I do feel like that a lot of that it's got so much better. It's the stability of platforms and things like that is so much better than it was. You're less likely to spend lots of time with the site going up and down, and
Sunday nights handwriting orders and faxing them to the warehouse.
So it's I think the technology has just got better, and therefore that makes things easier. I think we're just touching on the point about customer data. The capturing and then availability of data has got much better. It's much easier to understand your data, rather than having to get somebody to actually go into an SQL database and write a query for you and all those sorts of things. There are now ways of surfacing that, which puts power in the hands of people that don't have SQL skills, for example. So it's become less of a kind of a dark art of how you get your data out into something that's been much more open to everybody. And
just working. It's more like dial tone now, isn't it?
Exactly. So I think there is still, but then on the flip side of that, there are definitely still similar challenges that you get as you go through the scaling of a business. And I think some of those things kind of will always be there. You'll kind of, you have similar challenges about, growth and how you're coping with that. And, even when it comes to the amount of orders that you're taking and things like that, is when you get a surge of orders coming through, because actually you're now starting to, get the customers that you want coming in. It's then how do you deal with those? How are you making sure that you're not failing at the last mile?
Having made the good promises, you
exactly.
have to deliver the experience.
So those sorts of challenges remain, and I think it's but the beauty of it is that we've been through it before, so you can now preempt those rather than them being a bit of a surprise, as they were perhaps 16 years ago.
And so if someone came to you and said, "Oh, Andy, I've got my first director level role," and you had to say, "Look, in your first quarter, obviously listen, learn, but a couple of things you're bound to want to do are ... What's the thing you'd be saying? Focus on this when you get into a new role and you're trying to drive the digital business."
Yeah. Well, I think one of the main things I would say to people, which has got nothing to do with kind of developing a website or anything like that, is actually to understand the business you're in. I think it's so important to kind of, when you come in, is to not go off on, as you said, your shopping list of stuff that's worked before and be like, well, let's do that, let's do that, let's do that. You may come to those things, right? But actually the first part of it is really about understanding the business you're in, because all businesses are different. They may do roughly the same thing, but they're all different. They've all got their own quirks. They all have their own handwriting that you have to understand. And I think, coming from Selfridges and into Fenwick, one of the things that I really had to kind of, force myself to do was exactly that. It's like, actually just don't make an opinion on things yet. Just understand how the business is working. What's the business aspiration? Where does the business want to go to?
And what's kept it here this long?
Yeah,
because,
exactly. Yeah,
they're only 500 meters apart, but they've both been there for a long time and are both successful. So there must be some need for them both in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that gives you that grounding within the business then to hopefully make good decisions, because just because something worked in one place doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in another. It might be a variation or a flavour of something you've done before, that then if that's what you need to implement and push forward in your business, because actually it is a different business. It has a different customer. It has a
Very sound. So we've done DNA, we've done handwriting and flavours. So I think there's a good pause now to talk about you. We jumped in the middle because we've known each other for a while, but you have kind of done most roles and most department stores in the industry. So just give us the thumbnail sketch of how you got to digital director at Fenwicks.
I actually started out my working career as a chef, and I was working at Harvey Nichols in their 5th floor restaurant there, and I did about I think it was a year and a half, 2 years there. And then the relentlessness of the chefing lifestyle was, I just thought, I like doing this, but I don't love it enough to kind of want to really kind of put up with the incredibly low wages and and incredibly long hours. So I then was thinking, well, what do I want to do? What is next for me? And by chance, I came across a graduate training scheme for BHS. And it was for buyers and merchandisers.
You say by chance, we're talking someone had left a wrapper on...
Well, you say that. It was not too far off that. Actually, I was reading the Evening Standard, and in the back they used to have jobs
yes,
advertised. And it was an advert in there saying, we've got
for our younger listener, this is like LinkedIn jobs, but printed on dead trees, just so people know.
And I decided to go along to that, and was fortunate enough to be successful to be selected to go onto their graduate training scheme. And I was taken on as an assistant merchandiser, looking after underpants, really glamorous. And but that started me up within retail, and I kind of decided that I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed being part of retailing, especially actually being part of department store retailing.
But you also went into the hardest bit. I mean, people outside of retail don't realise how merchandising is just the hardcore, facing spreadsheet, deadline to deadline, grief centre of traditional retail. So you kind of went from the flaming kitchens into just a flaming pit of retail.
We used to have as well the on a Monday, your trade packs would print off on these printers that had kind of the dotted lines down the side, and they would be massive, great big packs. And then you had to spend ages with a highlighter going through and highlighting all the bits that you needed to look. Which, I mean, it was hard work, and it was, it was. But I think the thing that I enjoyed about it was when you suddenly saw success from something. So you kind of spotted a trend somewhere, or you spotted something that was happening within the numbers, and you did something about it, and suddenly you saw the sales coming through off the back of that. It was incredibly satisfying, and I just like the cut and thrust of it as well. I just like the world that that it was. So I then went and did a number of other. I actually stayed there for about 2.5 years, and I went to work for Virgin Megastores for a while. I then came back to BHS for another 2.5 years, and then went to Jaeger. And then from Jaeger, those were all merchandising roles.
And so was this Jaeger when it was still the wholly owned by itself? Jaeger?
Yes, yeah. We were based on Broadwick Street in
great place.
Yeah, it was great. I then moved to House of Fraser, and I actually started off I moved into supply chain development when I moved there.
And what does that mean? So you're in merchandising one day,
and
then someone says supply chain development. What is that?
It was really about initiatives and projects to both streamline and commercialise the House of Fraser supply chain. So I did lots of projects around things like the passing, and this probably still sounds quite old school, but with concessions, getting them to send their products and prices through, loading them onto the House of Fraser till system, so that in store they could scan and look up those products, not have to double key things and stuff like that.
That's literally the early web, except it's only a till system. We had a till system with a screen on it.
Yeah. So it was I did that for about a year and a half there, and then the business was sold. And my boss at the time, somebody called Colette, who was fantastic. Colette Wilson. Yeah. She was fantastic.
Big shout out to Colette.
Yeah, big shout out to her. She was fantastic. She was given the task of setting up the House of Fraser website, because we didn't have one at that point. And she re-employed me and a couple of others to help her with that task. And we started off, literally, I think it was about a team of 4. We had a little test website that was on Vendor, I think.
Yes.
Where we put a few products on to see what would happen. We put some TomToms on it and sold them all, and thought, this is amazing. And then we realised that they'd all been sold fraudulently, so that was not so good. so it was a great little kind of test bed for us before we then got into actually the project for real and choosing a partner to do that with. And we were one of the first, I think probably actually the first company in the UK to use Demandware, as it was then, now Salesforce. And I worked through that project with her to get that live. We got that live in about September 2007.
Yes.
And then I was re-employed into a role as the operations manager.
Re-employed. Other people would just say promoted.
Promoted, yeah.
Re-employed. Sounds like they'd let you go and then come on back. Was in fact, let's go with promoted. Yes. And so the arc then is, from understanding the cut and thrust of merchandising to building process, new systems into supply chain, and then the operational side of, going from a project to a working and growing website.
Yeah. And it was, I feel fantastically fortunate that was the path I took, because I think having that role as the operations manager meant that I was involved in everything that went on, which was a little bit fraying at times, especially when things weren't going quite so well. But it did mean that I got a really good grounding and understanding in all the different kind of areas. And as the business grew, we obviously brought in more people, more specialisms to come and help us, run the business going forward. But it was, going from a business that was taking £0 when we stood it up to taking, I think, around 150 million by the time I left the business. It was just a fantastic opportunity to really grow and scale with a business and be in a role that's kind of involved in everything, which I kind of feel gave me that grounding to then go on and do the other roles that I've done since then. But
this is something I feel is important when you're training the next generation of leaders?
Yeah.
Because you've already spoken about a graduate traineeship, which are great because they give you a chance not to get stuck in one area, but to understand the business. And people are taking time to explain things to you. Then this hands-on role, which grows and grows before you have to specialize, so you can get your arms around it. I think one of the real gifts that the digital revolution for the last 20 odd years has given is for people who are capable but still generalist to get their heads around a whole business,
Yeah.
which you don't get that opportunity always in a career.
No, you don't. You're right. It definitely does do that for you, and I think that's one of the things I've loved about working in digital in general is that it has given me that ability to.
But you are odd, if I may say so, in that
Just odd.
move from very analog, like the most.
Yeah.
So analog things with Excel to old-fashioned systems, so process, workflow, controls, to digital. Whereas a lot of people come from either a digital marketing background or a software background. But I think that sort of, I know how this all works, is such an important part. So if we'll come back to selfishness in a second, I hope. But if we jump to today, when you're looking to hire people, it's relatively straightforward to get people who've got modern, current digital experience. How do you find or train people to make sure they have this, the two other big things, which is operational and the shopkeeper gene? How do you build those into a digital capable employee?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I think it can be quite hard, right? Especially, I think, if you're going to work digitally in a retail environment, so, a department store or a fashion business or something like that, it does help. It's not a prerequisite, but it does help to have an interest in the sector that you're in. I think, because that then does help you foster that kind of desire to be a shopkeeper, essentially, and a digital shopkeeper, but a shopkeeper all the same. I think that one of the things that I encourage my team to do, and my teams previously to do, was to get out into store. Where you work for a business that has a physical presence, it's important. Getting out there and talking to the guys that are working, your colleagues that are working in the shop floor, really helps embed some of that excitement as well about product, and the touching and feeling of it. And it's not just a kind of a SKU or a something that's remote from you. It's getting that kind of that feel for actually being part of a retailer. I think it's a really important thing to do is to get people out into the store estate and get them to, because also you understand the business better, I think, by being out there. So we really encourage people to do that. When I employ people, I really look for, depending on the what we're employing for, but I look for people that have different skill sets to me. I don't want people that are necessarily that just going to come in and know the same things I know, or we employ people because they're coming in to do something where they're the expert in it, and I want to be able to empower people when they come into the business to really take their areas on and and make it their own, and help me then drive the business in the direction that we've got to go and make good decisions and all of those sorts of things. So I'm kind of looking for for those complementary skill sets, and the attitude part is probably the most important bit.
Attitude is everything.
Totally.
Attitude is everything.
Yeah.
Because that helps you attack things. But I can remember being with some point of sales people. I was doing a store loiter and watch, and a customer came up with a red dress in her left hand and a piece of paper in her right hand, and a blue dress. And she said, "Look, I've packed this up. I've bought it back. I don't want it, but I want to take this instead. It's £5 cheaper, so can I have the money back? Oh, and by the way, I bought on my husband's credit card, but here's the receipt." And I remember the look on the face of the person at the till thinking, I don't have a process for any of that. And it just made you realize how, as people move from, I will do the 3 things the web allows me to do, to everything I want to do in life, I expect the web to support.
Yeah.
And now omnichannel as well. It really does make you realize that we're just at the first stage of omnichannel.
We are, yeah. And I think that, if you look out there about who's doing omnichannel well at the moment, there are definitely pockets where where people have made some great strides and, have done some really interesting stuff. But it is, as you say, we're right at the start. There's so much more that can be done to join everything up and make it feel part of, it's one experience that you could be part of. But I think it's the important bit for me as well on kind of that omni-channel piece is about technology supporting the experience, not being the experience. I think there's still, and it's one of the things that makes stores relevant and special and something that will definitely, live on for a very long time, is the fact that there's that human element in store. And we should never forget that. It's really important. We don't, I say we don't. Personally, I don't want to go into stores that are robotic and, and you don't have that, that interaction, that a good sales assistant can really make you feel good about something, when by a simple thing like saying, "Oh, that looks great on you," and suddenly, "Oh, does it? Oh, brilliant!"
Well, I'll buy it too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's I think for us as well, it's how do we harness that that human element, the hospitality that you feel when you come into our stores. How do we further enhance that with technology, but also how do we bring that level of service online as well, so you kind of have the same feeling.
So 2 questions to close off. One's a real quick one. The headhunter calls and says, "Hey, come to Fenwicks." And you're saying, "I'm already at the world's best department store," as evidenced by prizes the last couple of years. We know that Fenwicks is lovely as well. What one thing was determinant, really thought, I'm going to jump. I really want to do this job. What was the one thing out of the many that stood in your mind as why you wanted to do it?
Opportunity, I think. And it's most of the roles that I've taken, it's always been about the opportunity. That's the thing that I've kind of, regardless of the pull of the brand itself, I'm working for a brand like Selfridges, there is if you talk to the vast majority of people who work there, they're very proud of working for Selfridges, right? Yeah. It's got a big
reputation.
Yeah. But actually, when I went into that role as well, it was about the opportunity. And, they were in a very different place than they are now. And it was like, I really feel like I can learn a lot. I can bring a lot to that role as well. And it's something that I feel like I can go on a journey with them that both of us can feel proud of, when it comes to the end or wherever it comes to. So, and I think the piece with Fenwick was the same for me, really. It was about the opportunity there. And when I started talking to them as well, it was like, that I felt that we had, a similar values, and it just felt like it was going to be the right thing for me. It felt like this is going to be something that's going to stretch me. It's going to be great for me personally, because I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to be able to hopefully bring my experience to the party as well, and really help the business move forward.
Yeah.
But there's a huge opportunity there from both growing the business, but also growing personally.
Great. Okay, well, you mentioned opportunity, so let's just wrap it up. Our time in the studios come to an end. We have to head on to the rain. What are you looking forward to when you get back? What's your top project that's going to keep you busy for the next few months?
There's a lot of stuff we're doing at the moment, but I think one of the things I'm really excited about is we're starting to look at doing a redesign of the site at the moment, and that I'm incredibly excited about. I think it's going to really bring our site forward. I think it's really going to help us represent the Fenwick of the future. It's going to be about not only it's the journey, but also how you feel when you shop with us. And I think I'm really excited about it.
Lovely. Well, looking at your face, I can see that. And I love the phrase Fenwick of the future. I think, Andy, just from what you've covered today, we can definitely see it's going to be a fun, interesting, and very worthwhile trajectory. So thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
No problem. Thanks, Ian.
I love that chef.
Do I get a badge?
I must do some badges. I got this little badge from Google Maps. Do you do like reviews on Google Maps and stuff? So I normally like review places, blah blah blah. And apparently I'm a quote unquote level 8 exploited person. I find it useful. So I chip it. They sent me a little thing saying, because you're level 8 and we value you so much, please give us your address. We're sending you an enamel pin. Mm-hmm. So I got this little pin that's got like a funny little Google Map person. I showed it to my son and said, "Hey, I'm level 8. He said, "Yeah, well done, Dad."
Yeah, exactly.
As in, really don't care you're level 8 at all. I thought, maybe it's not cool.